All right, wine lovers, get ready, because today we are uncorking the world of sustainable wines. It's a journey that's changing how we think about what's in our glass.
It really is. It's more than a trend. It's a whole new philosophy of winemaking.
Totally. And we've got research here taking us everywhere from organic vineyards in Brazil to the almost mystical practices of biodynamic winemaking in France.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is that the driving force behind it all seems to be this desire for authenticity. Wines that really reflect where they're from, their terroir.
I love that. So before we get into the specifics of organic, biodynamic, and natural wines,
Yeah.
can you paint a picture of what sparked this whole sustainable viticulture movement? Like, what's the big picture?
Well, a lot of our sources point to a growing awareness of the impact of conventional winemaking on the environment.
Yeah.
You know, things like pesticide use, water consumption, the health of the soil. These are big concerns.
Right. It sounds like sustainable viticulture is about more than just saying no to chemicals.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a whole different approach, working with nature rather than trying to control it.
Okay.
So imagine a vineyard that's teeming with life, beneficial insects, cover crops, and soil that's actually healthy.
Okay, I can picture it now. I'm strolling through the vineyard, warm sun in my face.
And that's what a lot of sustainable winemakers want to share. They want you to see that these practices lead to better grapes and ultimately better wines.
That makes sense.
Okay,
Okay, let's break down the different types of sustainable wines. Let's start with organic. What's the deal with organic wines?
so organic wine is made with grapes that are grown without synthetic pesticides or herbicides or fertilizers.
Okay.
The focus is on minimizing intervention in the vineyard and the winery, letting nature do its thing.
And there are certifications, right, to make sure the wine is actually organic.
Yeah, definitely. You'll see certifications like the IBD in Brazil or the Euroleaf in Europe. These organizations have really strict standards that
Right.
wineries have to meet to get the organic label.
This reminds me of something I read about organic vineyards using beneficial insects to control pests. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. Instead of using harsh chemicals, they're creating a balanced ecosystem in the vineyard,
Hmm.
like ladybugs eating aphids, cover crops that attract pollinators. It's all about biodiversity.
Wow, that's so different from that image people have of industrial agriculture. Okay, now for biodynamic wines, they always sound kind of mystical to me. What's the deal with cosmic rhythms and burying cow horns?
Yeah, I know some of the practices sound a little out there,
Right.
but there's this whole philosophy behind it. Biodynamic winemaking is based on the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, who believed that the farm, in this case, the vineyard, is a living organism connected to the cosmos.
So it's not just about the soil, but about the sun and moon and even planets.
Exactly. And those cow horns you mentioned, they're filled with quartz and buried in the vineyard to harness cosmic energy. And that energy is then used to improve the soil.
Wow.
They also use these special herbal preparations to strengthen the vines and promote a healthy ecosystem.
Wait, hold on. They bury cow horns filled with quartz? Okay, that's a new one.
Right.
I'm a little skeptical, but I'm fascinated. Tell me more about why they do that.
So it's all about working with these subtle energies in nature, this interconnectedness of everything.
Right.
Now, whether or not you buy into the whole cosmic thing, biodynamic practices have actually been shown to improve soil health and biodiversity, which leads to healthier vines and arguably more expressive wines.
Interesting. It's like they're taking ancient wisdom and combining it with a very holistic approach to farming.
hmm
I'm definitely curious to try some. Okay, let's move on to natural wines. Where do they fit into all of this?
Natural wines take that idea of minimal intervention to like another level.
Okay.
The whole philosophy is to let nature be in charge in both the vineyard and the winery.
So we're talking about spontaneous fermentation,
Yeah.
no added sulfites, minimal
Yeah.
filtering, right?
Exactly. Natural winemakers see those interventions as unnecessary and maybe even harmful to the wine. They think that by letting the grapes ferment with wild yeasts and avoiding all those harsh processing techniques, you get a wine that's totally unique and reflects where it's from.
I've heard that natural wines can be kind of cloudy or have sediment in them. Is that true?
Yeah, it's actually a sign that they're authentic. They haven't been filtered a lot, which means they keep more of their natural character.
Okay.
Now, some people don't like that, but other people see it as a good thing, a sign that the wine is alive and hasn't been messed with too much.
It sounds like there's a lot of variety in natural wines. Are they all funky and unpredictable?
Not all of them. Some natural wines can have those bold, funky flavors, but others are actually pretty clean and approachable.
Okay.
And that's part of what makes them exciting. Each bottle is a discovery. You never know exactly what you're going to get.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of these different sustainable approaches are creating a whole new world of flavors. But Before we get to tasting notes, can we zoom out a little and look at the global scene? What's happening with sustainable wine around the world?
Sustainable wine is a global thing now, with producers in both traditional and new wine regions. It's really cool to see.
I'm curious about Brazil. It's not the first place you think of when you think of wine, but I've heard they're doing some interesting things there.
Brazil is becoming a real player in sustainable wine. One of our sources talks about this amazing winery in Vale do São Francisco that's using drip irrigation and drought-resistant grapes to make award-winning Syrah. It just shows that you can make amazing wine in tough conditions.
Wow, turning a challenge into a success story. Tell me more about the different wine regions in Brazil. What kind of wines are they making, and what sustainable approaches are they using?
Well, Serra is known for sparkling wines
Yeah.
and cool climate grapes like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. They're really into organic and biodynamic viticulture. The cooler climate helps them make these elegant wines.
What about Valle do São Francisco? That's a much warmer region, right?
Yeah, it's a semi-arid region, but they have adapted grapes like Syrah and Chenin Blanc to grow in the heat. They're also big on organic wine production, proving that sustainability can work anywhere.
That's amazing. And you mentioned another region, Serra de Mantiqueira. What's unique about it?
Serra de Mantiqueira. It's a hidden gem. High-altitude region in Minas Gerais known for its cool nights and sunny days.
Wow.
They make some amazing Sauvignon Blanc and Syrah. The terroir gives the wines bright acidity and really complex aromas.
I am adding all three of those regions to my list.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk about the most important part, the taste. What can people expect when they open a bottle of sustainable wine?
So first thing to remember is that sustainable wine isn't one specific flavor. It's more about how the wine is made.
Right.
But there are some things they tend to have in common.
Like what?
Sustainable wines often have this vibrant, pure fruit flavor that's captivating, and they really express their terroir, all those things about the soil and climate and landscape.
So it's less about tasting the grape and more about tasting a sense of place.
Yeah, exactly. And this is especially true with biodynamic and natural wines. They have this energy and complexity that some people think comes from the minimal intervention during the winemaking process.
I've heard some people say that natural wines are too funky or earthy. Is that a fair thing to say?
Well, it depends. Natural wines are all about letting the grapes do their thing, and sometimes that means flavors that are a little more rustic.
Hmm.
Imagine tasting a wine and almost sensing the moon cycles or that quartz buried in the vineyard. Some people say biodynamic wines have this extra vibrancy. You'll have to try some and see what you think.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm starting to think of these wines as more than just drinks. They're like little windows into different places and different philosophies.
Hmm.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to talk about something we mentioned before, the rise of eno-tourism.
Yes.
What's that all about?
It's not just about the wine anymore. People want to experience the world of sustainable wine for themselves. They want to visit wineries that care about these practices and learn more about the process.
Yeah, they want to walk through those biodiverse vineyards and talk to the winemakers and really be a part of it all.
Right. And there are so many incredible places around the world where you can do that. From Tuscany to South Africa, the possibilities are endless.
And what's great is that this kind of travel can actually help local communities and the environment.
It's a win-win. You get to enjoy amazing wine and support producers who care about sustainability.
All right, listeners, we're going to take a quick break to let all of this soak in, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll continue exploring sustainable wines. We'll talk about the future of the industry and how important ESG principles are becoming. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we were talking about eno-tourism and how people actually want to visit these sustainable vineyards. But let's zoom out a bit. What does the future hold for a sustainable wine?
One of the biggest things that comes up in our research is the importance of ESG.
ESG.
Yeah, environmental, social, and governance factors.
ESG. It's everywhere these days. But what does it mean for wine?
So on the environmental side, it's about making sure winemaking doesn't hurt the planet.
Right.
Reducing carbon emissions, saving water, protecting biodiversity, having healthy soil. A lot of the things we talked about, like organic, biodynamic, and natural winemaking, are already doing these things.
Right, they're like ESG in action.
Here.
What about the social and governance parts? What do those look like?
The social part of ESG is about things like treating workers fairly, making sure everyone working in the vineyards and wineries is treated ethically and paid a living wage. It's also about supporting local communities, having diversity in the industry, and giving back to the places where the grapes are grown.
And I guess the governance is about being transparent, accountable, and ethical.
Exactly. It's about making sure the whole process, from growing the grapes to bottling the wine, is done responsibly and benefits everyone involved.
So it's not really a set of rules. It's more like a philosophy about doing things the right way, thinking about the impact on the planet, the people, and the future of the industry.
Yeah, you got it. And what's interesting is that we're seeing a big change in what consumers want.
Mm.
People are more aware of their choices, and they want wines from producers who follow ESG principles.
It's like sustainability is just as important as taste now. People want to support businesses that do the right thing.
Right. And this is changing the whole industry.
Yep.
Wineries are realizing that sustainability isn't just a marketing thing.
Ah.
It's actually good for business.
Mm.
It brings in customers, reduces costs, and helps them adapt to changes in the environment.
That makes sense. Sustainability is becoming more and more important, and smart businesses are paying attention. Okay, let's get a little technical now. What are some of the technologies that are shaping the future of sustainable wine?
One big one is precision viticulture.
Precision viticulture. That sounds fancy. What is it?
It's using technology to collect data about the vineyard so you can make better decisions about everything.
Mm.
Irrigation, fertilization, pest control, harvesting everything.
So like sensors, drones, even satellites to get all this information about the vineyard.
Exactly. They can keep track of things like soil, moisture, nutrients, how ripe the grapes are, even if there are diseases. This means they can use resources more efficiently, only do things where they're needed, and be better for the environment.
Wow, that's like combining the art of winemaking with science. That's pretty amazing.
Uh-huh.
What else is new?
Renewable energy is a big one. Lots of wineries are going solar, using those big panels on their roofs
Okay,
to make clean electricity.
that's great. So they're powering their whole operation with the sun. I love that.
Some wineries are even using things like grapevine clippings and leftover grape skins to make energy.
Wait, so they're turning waste into fuel. That's
Yeah,
brilliant.
it's a great example of circularity, using everything and making less waste. Speaking of waste, we can't forget about packaging. It's a big issue for the wine industry.
Right, those glass bottles are heavy and they take a lot of energy to make and transport. What are some of the alternatives?
Some wineries are switching to lighter glass bottles, so it takes less energy to ship them. Others are trying different materials like recycled plastic, aluminum cans, even cardboard.
Cardboard wine bottles. I've got to see that.
They're real. And they're actually really strong and recyclable. It's a cool idea that could really change things.
The future of sustainable wine sounds pretty exciting. But are there any challenges? I mean, it can't all be easy, right?
One of the biggest challenges is that there's no clear definition of what a natural wine is.
Right.
Like what we were talking about before, there's no official standard or certification for natural wine.
So people need to be careful and really understand how the wine is made.
Exactly. There are some groups trying to come up with rules and certifications, but it's a tricky thing. For now, it's best to find producers who are open about how they make their wine and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Transparency is key. Another thing we talked about is the cost. Organic and biodynamic farming can be more expensive, which means the wines cost more. How can we make these wines affordable for everyone?
That's a good question. I think it starts with education. If more people understand why sustainable wine is important and how much conventional wine really costs, not just the price tag, but the environmental and social costs, then maybe they'd be willing to pay a little more for wines that are made the right way.
It's about changing how we think about it, right? Sustainable wine isn't a luxury. It's a better way of doing things that benefits everyone.
Exactly. Another challenge is finding people with the right skills. Sustainable winemaking takes a lot of knowledge and a real passion for the craft. It's not easy to find people who have that, especially in places where the industry is still growing.
It's not just about following a recipe. It's about respecting the land and the traditions of winemaking.
Right. And then there's the big one, climate change. Things like rising temperatures, changes in rainfall, and extreme weather are affecting wine regions all over the world.
That's a scary thought. How are wineries dealing with these changes?
They're trying different grape varieties that can handle heat and drought better, changing when they plant and harvest, and finding new ways to irrigate and save water. It's a constant process of adapting.
It sounds like the industry is facing some serious challenges, but it also sounds like they're determined to find solutions.
Definitely. There's a lot of optimism in the sustainable wine movement. People are really committed to protecting the environment, supporting communities, and making wines that taste good and have a purpose.
That's good to hear. It seems like the future of sustainable wine is bright. But before we move on, I want to talk about something really important, diversity.
Yeah, it's a huge and diverse world.
Right, there are so many regions and grape varieties and techniques. It can be hard to know where to start.
The great thing is that there's something for everyone, and that's true for sustainable wines too. No matter what kind of wine you like, you can find sustainable options that taste good and align with your values.
So it's about being open to new things, trying different wines, and figuring out what you enjoy the most.
That's the key. Talk to people who know about wine, visit wineries, go to tastings, ask questions.
Okay.
The more you learn about sustainable wine, the more you'll appreciate it.
I like that. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the main thing is that sustainability is a journey, not a destination. It's about always learning and growing.
So it's not about finding the perfect sustainable wine, but about being curious and asking questions.
Exactly. It's about understanding that every bottle of wine has a story that connects the environment, the people who made the wine, and our own values.
I love that.
Mm.
So what can our listeners do today to be a part of this movement?
Next time you're buying wine, don't just grab a random bottle.
Okay.
Think about the story behind that wine.
Yeah, look past the label and the grape and the region and think about where those grapes came from, how they were grown, and if the winemaker shares your values.
And if you're curious, learn more. Talk to the people who sell wine, visit wineries, plan a trip to a wine region. The more you learn, the more you'll enjoy it.
And remember, every time you choose a sustainable wine, you're not just enjoying a drink, you're supporting a better future for wine.
Cheers to a future where every sip is about pleasure and responsibility.
Well said. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey. And to our listeners, we hope you'll explore the world of sustainable wines. Until next time, happy sipping. Okay, listeners, we've traveled from those sunny vineyards in Brazil all the way to France, learning about sustainable wines. We've talked about the philosophies, the challenges, the cool things happening in the industry. But as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think it comes down to this. Sustainability isn't about reaching a goal. It's more like a journey, always learning and changing.
So it's less about finding that perfect sustainable wine and more about just being curious, asking questions, and kind of expanding how we think about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's about understanding that the wine world is complex. Every bottle has a story about the environment, the people who made the wine, and our own values.
That's a great way to put it. So for our listeners who want to explore this world of sustainable wines, what's one thing they can do today?
The next time you're at the store looking at wine, don't just grab the first bottle you see. Take a minute and think about where that wine came from. Think about the story behind it.
Look beyond the label, the grape, the region. Ask yourself, where were these grapes grown? How did they become wine? Does this bottle represent the kind of world I want to support?
And if you're curious, find out more. Talk to the people who sell wine, visit wineries, maybe even plan a trip to a wine region. The more you explore, the more you'll enjoy it.
I like that. And remember, every time you choose a sustainable wine, you're not just enjoying a drink, you're supporting a better future for winemaking.
Right. Cheers to a future where we can enjoy our wine and feel good about it too.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge with us. And to our listeners, we hope you feel inspired to explore the world of sustainable wines. Be adventurous, try new things. Until next time, happy sipping.